Hello, my name is Nicholas Raleigh, and I'll be giving a speech over the Watergate scandal. Here's my wonderful audience members, Ryan Fitz, Justin Sanders, Maria Angelotti, and Jesse Cameron. Wouldn't you like to know the reason that Richard Nixon was the only president to resign from office? I've researched 5 different websites gathering as much information as I could over this topic. Many people remember the name Watergate as a blanket term used to describe the fall of President Nixon, but do you remember the specifics of those events? It's taken years filled with interviews and books to start to understand the complications of what they were. There were 3 parts to the Watergate scandal. First part, Washington Post investigates. Part 2, the actions taken by the U.S. government. Part 3 was President Nixon resigning. Now to go in more detail about Part 1. First part, Washington Post investigates. The story intrigued 2 young reporters named Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, the 2 who originally signed to the story. Woodward's notes would show he learned from police sources that the men came from Miami, wore surgical gloves, and carried thousands of dollars in cash. It was said by one source, a professional type operation. GOP security aide among those arrested reported that burglar James McCord was on the payroll of Nixon's re-election committee. Shortly after, a White House spokesman said he would not comment on a third-rate burglary. Woodward and Bernstein reported that the grand jury investigating the robbery had sought testimony from 2 men who worked in the White House under Nixon, former CIA officer Howard Hunt and former FBI agent Gordon Liddy. Both men will be indicted for guiding the burglars with walkie-talkies from a hotel room opposite the Watergate building. $25,000 check for Nixon's re-election campaign ended up being deposited in the bank accounts of one of the burglars, resulting in the headline story, "Bug Suspects Got Campaign Funds," that stated that Maurice Stans received the money. Stans was the former Secretary of Commerce who served as Nixon's chief fundraiser. Woodward relied on Mark Felt, a ranking official in the FBI, as a confident source. Now having access to the FBI reports, the 2 reporters could rely on Felt to confirm or deny what other sources were telling them. Woodward had promised to keep Felt's identity secret, only referring to him as Deep Throat. Deep Throat's identity would not be revealed until 2005, 33 years later. Now moving on to what the U.S. government did about these accusations. Part 2, U.S. government takes action. One investigation was led by Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. Cox was a liberal Harvard law professor that had served as Solicitor General in the Kennedy administration. The other investigation was led by North Carolina Senator Sam Ervin, chairman of the Senate Watergate Committee. Ervin was a conservative Democrat known for his interest in constitutional law. As the Senate Watergate Committee's nationally televised hearing captured national interest, Ervin's tenacious grilling of reluctant witnesses made him a household name. The scandal soon spread beyond the original burglary. In 1973, it was revealed that Hunt and Liddy broke into Daniel Ellsberg's office. Ellsberg was a former analyst who gave top-secret papers to the New York Times. Seeking information to discredit Ellsberg, nothing was found and he left undetected. The most sensational revelation was to come in July of 1973. White House aide Alexander Butterfield told the committee that Nixon had a secret taping system that recorded phone calls and conversations in the Oval Office. When Nixon refused to release the tapes, Ervin and Cox issued subpoenas. The White House cited executive privileges, the doctrine that the president, as chief executive, is entitled to confidential advice from aides. The final decision of whether or not Nixon had to give up the tapes was left up to the Supreme Court. After agreements of the White House giving up written summaries of the tapes, Ervin accepted, but Cox rejected the deal. On October 20th, Nixon ordered Attorney General Richardson to fire Cox. Richardson resigned rather than complete the task, as did his deputy William Ruckelshaus. Now, the story of President Nixon's resignation. Part 3, Nixon resigned. As it was demanded that the White House turn over the tapes and transcripts, the Judiciary Committee of the House of Representatives began to consider it a presidential impeachment. The pressure kept coming in March 1974 when 7 indictments were handed out due to conspiracy. Nixon's legal defense began to wither in May when a federal court ruled in favor of Jaworski's subpoenas for the tapes. Nixon's lawyers appealed the decision to the Supreme Court. His political position faltered in June amid reports that all Democratic members were prepared to vote for impeachment. When Nixon released the tapes on June 23, 1972, a conversation had shown that he had directly played a leading role in the cover-up. This tape was dubbed the Smoking Gun tape. On August 8, 1974, Nixon announced his resignation in a dramatic television address from the Oval Office. In a final speech to the White House staff, Nixon told his audience, "Those who hate you don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself." Now you know a little bit more about the Watergate scandal. Let's review it. Those were the three main parts of the Watergate scandal. First part, the Washington Post investigates. Part two is what the U.S. government did. And part three was Nixon resigning. So what have we learned here today? That even the President of the United States can make some poor decisions. This whole fiasco lasted roughly 2 years when it could have easily been taken care of. Hit the button.